Hi there, I'm Lewis Foster, a journalist in the Manx Radio newsroom, and welcome to this edition of Newscast. A former children's champion on the Isle of Man says there are serious failings within children's social care that need to be addressed. Onchan MHK Rob Callister went through the care system himself as a youngster and knows all too well the difficulties that can present themselves when leaving it. Following the publication of Ofsted's report into children's social care services earlier in October, Mr Callister has called for a general debate to be held on the matter in next month's sitting of Tynwald. He explained to me why.
The reason why I've brought the general debate on the Ofsted inspection report into the Isle of Man Children's Social Care Services is one that I went through social services myself as a child and a young teenager. But secondly, I think there are some reports that should not just be very quickly put into the public domain and then put on a shelf and disappeared. This really does need the full attention of Tynwald Court, and that is why I have brought it forward for that general debate. Because in the heart of all of this, there is some serious failings, which the court cannot ignore and neither can the Manx government ignore. And I will go further than just say failings. I think some of them are institutional failings, and they need to be addressed as a priority.
You mentioned your own personal experience. Did you resonate with any of the findings in this?
Yeah, I have, and it's taken me a couple of weeks to write my speech in readiness for that. And I think there's a couple of things that come out of this. And I think first thing to say is the report is very clear that the staff within the environment of the island's children's services are very attentive, they're kind, they're nurturing, and that is great to see. Where the failings are, it is on the part of government. We are failing children in social care at the moment. There's clear gaps in legislation, there's clear gaps in education, and more importantly, there are clear gaps in accommodation for when children leave care. And I know that when I left care in 1985, that there was clear failings, and I ended up finding myself homeless, which I mentioned in the last administration. But what really concerns me is the fact that the gaps are still there. And what angers me more is the fact that Kerry Sharp, Tim Baker and myself sat on a committee that looked at accommodation for vulnerable young adults. That committee made 21 recommendations, all fully endorsed, fully approved by Tynwald. None of them have come into effect. Over the last 4 years, there has been numerous children that have left social care on the Isle of Man. We have failed them. We've let them down.
We've heard even the courts, I believe, say the provision for care leavers is inadequate. What's the first step to improving that system?
Well, I think the first thing that this government must do is to appoint an independent, non-political Children's Commissioner on the Isle of Man as a priority, and I'm now calling on the Chief Minister to do that. There is a comment in the Island Plan that they're going to review it. Well, that's not good enough. This report clearly says that children's voice in care and across the island has been lost, and we now need that Children's Commissioner to come here, be independent, and to start to give children on the island a voice and to look at their rights. But my focus, because I've come through the care system myself, I've always been very focused on children in care. But my colleague, Mrs Kane and Mrs Sharp, along with Mr Baker, have been brilliant advocates for children right across our island.
Explain to us exactly what a Children's Commissioner could do. What would be their role?
Well, theirs would be looking at the rights of children in care. They will be given them that strong voice, going out and being an advocate and promoting a child's concerns voice. And what they'd also do is be able to give children on the island an input into policy and into direction of where the island is going. Because at the moment, as this report clearly says, it says the child's voice is lost. And I know that was focused on children in care. But I think if you look at the role of a Children's Commissioner elsewhere, it's clearly that they have a strong position to play to make sure that a child's voice is not lost.
How would that differ from what the role of the Children's Champion is, say, for instance, now?
The last 4 Children's Champions on the island have all been very clear that the role is being far too restricted. they can't do what they want to do. An independent, non-political commissioner, children's commissioner, coming in would have the legislation, they'd have the scope, they'd be able to be that very firm advocate for children on the Isle of Man. And it is a shame that the children's champion role on the Isle of Man is so restrictive, but it's very clear from the 4 previous champions that we've all cited the same reasons for the role is not working at the moment.
For somebody who's going through the care system now and someone who's been through it with your perspective, how easy is it to become disenfranchised and not have faith in the island's political system, in the island system in general, to support you? What reassurances can you give to somebody going through care now that things will get better?
I think if you read this report, it clearly says we're failing children leaving care. Now, that doesn't mean that the people who've looked after those children are not there to support them when they can. But where we're letting them down is the accommodation. The accommodation for children leaving care is not good enough. And again, I'll use my own example. I left school with very few qualifications. I left care with very few qualifications. But I was able in my 20s, when I started to really think about where I was going in my life, that people were there to support me. And they supported me time and time again. And I was able to get myself educated to above a degree level. I want to see every child leaving care being given that same opportunity. It may not be in their teens, it may be in their 20s, and for some it may even be in their 30s. We've got to be there as a government and as an island to support those people coming through care when they are ready to say that I want to improve my life.
Well, the man who oversees all things social care is DHSC Minister Lawrie Hooper. I put Mr Callister's thoughts about the need for a Children's Commissioner and the prospect of a general debate on the matter to him.
It's a difficult one to answer, really. So this is a regulatory report that the department has commissioned as part of our obligations under the Manx Care Act, and because we really do believe that external inspection of services is a way to really drive service improvement. This one was done by Ofsted because the CQC don't cover services here that would need to be inspected, which is why we reached out to Ofsted in the same way that we did with the CQC for nobles and GPs and dentists. None of those reports have come for a debate in Parliament, and I wouldn't necessarily expect them to. Like I say, it's part of a regular inspection regime, so we've been briefing Tynwald and briefing the press around these reports because this is the first round of inspection reports that are being done, but they will be only the first round, so there will be more regular inspections done of all services at least once every 5 years. Every service will be inspected in this way, with interim inspections done either by the department or by commissioned service providers as and when they're appropriate in the intervening periods. I wouldn't necessarily expect those reports to all be debated in Tynwald. I mean, the CQC inspected 70-odd services. It wouldn't really be a proportionate response, I think, for Tynwald to debate every single regulatory report that the department does. It's not the done thing. We don't debate every regulatory report that any other regulator does. It's just not necessarily appropriate. However, in this case, because I think of the nature of the report and because it does highlight some particular issues across children's services, but like I said, the last time we talked about this with the media, that weren't really a surprise to anyone that's been engaged with the service. I don't think they're a surprise to Mr Callister as children's champion. I can understand why the strength of feeling around this says maybe it is appropriate to have a debate. And actually, I think maybe that's why a general debate has been proposed, because it isn't really, there'll be no resolution from that. There won't be a Tynwald vote that instructs anything to happen. It is just an opportunity really for members to air their views and share any thoughts and concerns they may have. So from my perspective, I don't see this as being a negative thing. Actually, I'm looking forward to the debate to see what members think about the Ofsted report, about the external inspection process more generally, and if they have any views really on the services that are being delivered and service improvements that they would expect to see come forward as a result of this report.
His concern was that without that debate, this is one of those reports that, in his words, could be put on a shelf, forgotten about. Do you think there's any fear of that happening?
Absolutely none whatsoever. So as part of the external inspection regime, which is now a statutory inspection regime that is required by the law, the department, as you will have seen, have already published, alongside Manx Care, the initial response and action plan to this particular report. We have established something called the Children's Services Improvement Board, which is actually going to produce a cross-government response to this report, because a number of the issues raised, for example, accommodation issues for care leavers, aren't really within the gift of Manx Care. They are government-wide challenges that will need government-wide solutions. We've already talked quite openly about that. That action plan is going to be published as well. So there are very public ways for Tynwald to hold the department and for the department to hold Manx Care accountable for delivering on the improvements that this report identifies are needed. So there is absolutely no likelihood of this sitting on a shelf. It is a core function of the department to deliver on inspection and quality and safety improvement and to make sure that oversight is happening. It is one of the strengths, I think, of our new separation between the department and Manx Care, in that we can now do that. We can focus on that. So no, I have no concerns at all that this report isn't going to be acted on with urgency. I've got no concerns at all that this report will sit on the shelf, just as the CQC reports won't sit on a shelf. They're already seeing improvements being delivered by Manx Care. There are already action plans out there which we can be questioned on, which the department can hold Manx Care accountable for delivering. I think the system we have in place now around this external inspection and reporting and the publication of all this and the transparency is a significant step improved from what used to happen in the health service, where actually we didn't do this. In the first instance, we didn't even have the services regularly inspected. So we're in a completely different world to where the health service was 5 years ago.
What do you make of the suggestion of introducing a children's commissioner? I would call it Mr Callister's suggestion, but it seems it's been something that's been brought up by multiple children's champions over the years.
It's an interesting one because I think, I might be wrong, but I think that there was an action in the Island Plan for the government to consider the potential role, benefit and remit of the Children's Commissioner and adopting a child-first approach across the whole of government.
I think that
was an action.
That's right, yeah, but Mr Callister himself says that a review, a consideration of a Children's Commissioner isn't enough. Actually, it has to be introduced, were his words.
That's fair enough. I mean, people can feel quite strongly about this. My position on anything like this would be the first step is to understand what it is you're looking for and what potential benefits there would be, because establishing a new body, a statutory role, for example, would come with a significant cost. And it may very well be absolutely the right thing to do, but the first step in understanding that, I think, is to undertake that assessment and say, well, what benefits are we seeking to achieve? What would it cost against those benefits? And is this the best or only way of achieving that outcome? There could very well be other things that could be done instead that would achieve the outcomes that we're looking for. So in terms of that review, I think that's probably the first step on any journey to creating a new statutory body or a new statutory function would be to understand what it is we're trying to achieve. From my own perspective, I can definitely see the benefits of having a strengthened voice for looked after children. A Children's Commissioner could provide that. Equally, the Children's Champion could provide that voice if their remit was strengthened in some way. So I think there are many different ways of resolving that particular issue, but it's not something that I have any objections to in principle. It's definitely something that I think has to be considered in the round.
Do you think that's possible, strengthening the role of the Children's Champion, easing some of those apparent restrictions we've heard about?
Quite possibly. I mean, I'm not sure there are any real restrictions in the role. The Children's Champion chairs the Voices and Participation Council. They sit on the corporate parenting group, so they do have direct input into actual service delivery at the government level. So I can't really see how you could really do more than say this person who is responsible for being the voice, really, and the advocate for corporate parenting and for looked after children actually has that input at the very highest levels and at the very operational level. So they're involved, as far as I understand, at least at all those levels. So there's definitely opportunities to say, well, how could this be further improved? What could we do better? What could we do more of? But I'm not sure that role is restricted in any way. I've certainly not encountered any restrictions from the current Children's Champion, Mrs Sharp. Her report, I think, is quite comprehensive, really, in the issues that it covers, and it does touch on a lot of the issues that Ofsted have delved into in more detail. So from my perspective, I think the Children's Champion, as it currently stands as a role, does have quite a lot of input and quite a lot of influence on the system and on the way services are delivered. So, and like I say, if there is a way of strengthening that, and if there does need to be more done to kind of beef up that role to make sure that they can really, truly represent the views and needs of looked after children, I don't see why we wouldn't be considering that as well.
And just finally, what would you say then to a child perhaps going through the care system now to assure them that their voice will be heard, their needs will be met, and the findings of this report will be taken seriously?
Well, essentially, I would say exactly what you've just said there, Lewis. The report is being taken very seriously. It is being given a priority by the department and by Manx Care. We accept, I think, that the service, as was inherited by Manx Care from the then department, from the last administration, was not in a good state and has come along really in leaps and bounds over the last few years, and there really is, as Ofsted have highlighted, a real commitment from all the staff involved to continue to improve and deliver that improvement in the service. So the commitment is absolutely there to try and make these things better, to try and improve the service. But equally, I would say to children who are in care that are being supported by the department to reach out themselves. I know Mrs. Sharp, as the Children's Champion, is more than happy to engage, to talk to people directly, to talk to staff directly as well, to make sure that their voices are heard and that they are really a core part of improving service delivery. It's something we're quite keen on in the department as well. So reforming the HSCC into a more patient-focused and service user-focused organisation is a key part, I think, of strengthening the voice of people who use and who are reliant on health and care services, and that isn't just within Nobles Hospital, but will cover the whole remit of social care as well. So I think there are lots of different work strands in place that are trying to improve how we hear directly from patients and service users and how we get their views and their needs really fed back into the system quite quickly, to try and make even what sometimes can seem from us looking in from the outside to be quite small improvements, but actually can have quite a big impact on the people using those services.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Little Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.